Well, the first thing that I would like to do is to, of course, welcome you all to this seminar series. And one moment, please, I'm a bit lost among screens. Okay. This seminar series is entitled Explorations of Hope in the Capitalocene, Critical Theory in Literary and Cultural Research. This series, if I can share my screen with you. This series has been designed as an activity that is carried out by the members of the National Research Project entitled Resisting the Capitalocene, Narratives of Hope in the 21st Century, which was recently granted by the Spanish Ministry of Science, Innovation and Universities. This series, as you can see on the screen, features 4 different seminars delivered by team members in which we propose different critical texts in order to think about their potential for our research. And why 4 seminars in particular, not 5, not 6, not 2? Well, this is an activity that we would normally do privately among the team members as part of our regular research in this project. The reason behind this is that the project is organized around 4 different working packages, which deal with different thematic areas that we discuss as a team. However, in our desire to share the work we do with society at no cost, and also to provide educational materials that can be of potential interest to wider audiences, we decided to offer this set of seminars as meetings which could be followed by anyone with a video conferencing link. Well, in this sense, what we are offering is this activity also as a free formative seminar for doctoral students who are enrolled in the doctoral inter-university program supported by the University of Córdoba, the University of Extremadura, the University of Huelva, and the University of Jaén, which is called Lenguas y Culturas, or in English, Languages and Cultures. Therefore, participants attending to all seminars will obtain a certification for the program. So this is also something that we are offering as a possibility. Well, if you allow me to turn to today's session is entitled A Hopeful Cartography of Action and Emotion in a Disappearing World. And it will be led by my colleague and friend, Dr. Leonor María Martínez-Serrano, also from the University of Córdoba, where she is also a senior lecturer, and of course, by myself. In this sense, I would like to share with you that I will be in charge of the cartography of action, and my colleague, Leonor María, will be in charge of the cartography of emotion. Well, if you allow me to share briefly the dynamics of the session, our intention is to start with a short presentation of the selected text by Byung-Chul Han, specifically chapters entitled Prelude and Hope and Acting from his most recent publication, which is The Spirit of Hope. It will be followed by a short debate among team members, to which, of course, participants are invited to contribute if they feel like it. Next, we will repeat this same dynamic with the selected TED by Paul Bogard. And finally, we will close the session by reflecting on both the different topics that arise from Paul Bogard's text, as well as by reflecting on how these 2 texts can dialogue with each other. So if there are, well, no questions or no remarks, I would like to share my presentation with you and to start presenting. Okay. Let me type myself. Okay. Well, first of all, as I said, my this description or comment on Byung-Chul Han's work will be based on action. And in this sense, I would like to simply share with you that my presentation will be structured into 3 different parts. The first part will be a kind of very short bibliographical biographical sketch and a review of Han's publications and contextualization of the Spirit of Hope. Then I will move on to summarizing and commenting the prelude and the chapter entitled Hope and Acting. In this sense, I will be highlighting key features of hope and some of the main issues or topics, themes that have arisen here. And I will conclude by throwing some questions that I am asking actually myself, and in case they spark debate among participants. And well, first of all, I would like to briefly summarize that, of course, Han was born in 1959 in Seoul, in South Korea. I think that many of you are familiar with this author, so this is going to be a very short introduction. And he, as you all know, he's a philosopher, he's a cultural theorist, he's an essayist who currently lives in Berlin, in Germany. And he has been there since he, in Germany, I mean, since he moved there to pursue university degrees. And he has several university degrees. He has a degree in philosophy, another one in German literature, and also in Catholic theology, at the University of Freiburg and also at the University of Basel. His main areas of attention in his publications are concerned, of course there are others, but I have just highlighted some of them, are concerned with neoliberalism, power dynamics, digital culture, contemporary society, or cultural theory. There are others, as I said. Even though German is not his mother tongue, he writes in German, and he has published greatly, actually more than 30 books, with titles that you may be very familiar with. Well, there is a mistake there. I meant more than 30. His publications are known for being, well, they sell a lot, and his work has been translated into so many different languages. And in this sense, I would like to share with you a curious fact that I have discovered, and it is that I have found out this tendency by which his translations of books are available, at least in recent years, become available in Spanish before they become available in English. And in fact, I would like to tell you that I was able to read The Spirit of Hope in Spanish translation. I don't know if you can see me, but I got this copy of his publication. Actually, I think this was something that I was able to buy back in September. And this was not available in English when I had access to the Spanish translation. As I don't find useful listing all his titles, and there are so many of them, I've compiled only some of them that you can see in the slide. And these, I compiled the ones that I find that are more representative of the topics that I have mentioned and of the topics, of the main topics that he concerns himself with. And among all of these, I'm particularly interested in calling your attention to the crisis of narration, because I believe that his main thesis in this book is actually very useful for our research in this project. Of course, needless to mention that I'm not an expert in Han's work. This is a note of caution, and I've only read him as part of my research, of course. But let me move on now to The Spirit of Hope. You may have noticed the beautiful illustration in the book cover, as well as the very impressive ones that are included in the book itself. The book as you may have seen, combines Han's text with images of the work by Anselm Kiefer. He is a German artist who merges art and literature, painting and sculpture in his work, and he uses any material he finds he has at hand. He uses lead, cement, tree roots, burnt books, fabric, and many more. And he does so to reflect on historical events, the cosmos, life and death. So his interests are very much, I think, attuned with the type of work that Han does. For me, it has been quite interesting to read Han's meditations in combination with the images, because I found out that, for me, it was my perception, these provide actually food for thought and integrate very interestingly with the ideas coming out from Han's text. I don't know about your impressions when reading the chapters. Hopefully you will be able to share with us later. But for me, the text was at times difficult to understand because I was not really able to guess where he was leading to, or for me, he was sometimes unable to trace a clear uniting thread in his paragraphs or in his main topics. And I had the impression that he was like kind of jumping from one topic to another without really connecting them meaningfully. It's not that it was difficult, it was not a difficult read for me. But I just found that there was no connection or no clear connection. And he kept on moving from adjacent topics to adjacent authors. And at times I could not see the relationship between choosing one given author or another one. And anyway, for my presentation, what I've tried to do is to extract the ideas that I resonated with more in view of the potential that I found out that it provides for our work in the project, and in particular for the work package that Leonor, Belen, and I share. And this work package is entitled Narratives of Hope, the More Than Human World in the Capitalocene. So I guess by learning about this title of the work package, you understand how much it is attuned to the title of this seminar. Well, I've tried to answer the question about what hope is or what hope means for Han. And after reading the text, I would like to summarize my answer in the sentence that I have incorporated into the slide. And it is, well, for me, as I came to understand at the end of reading this text, was hope is or becomes the alternative to neoliberal forms of life. Or, yeah, the alternative or an alternative. So from the start, when presenting hope, I think that he does so by placing the term in a web of interconnections with other terms. And as you can see on the slide, I have placed hope in the middle, and then I have surrounded it by a set of concepts of which hope is not, but is placed in opposition to, or it's placed aligned with. So in this sense, I would like to say that fear is in close opposition to it. Optimism and pessimism are actually different concepts which should not be confused with hope. And the last two terms that you can find on the screen, trust and love, are very much aligned with hope. So what I will intend to describe in the next few minutes is how they are related to each other. And bearing in mind that the relationship established between these 5 terms and hope are different. Some of them are by being aligned with, and some others are by being, I would even say, opposites. So from the start of his prelude, he clearly opposes hope against fear, by listing a set of features that integrates each term, even as opposing binaries. Fear is related to the multiple crises, catastrophes, disasters that seem to have become the norm now. Ham presents this mode of living that concerns itself simply with survival. This is fear, in order to present the alternative that hope would provide, which would be not survival, but life. So you've got these oppositions. These two alternatives provides another list of features. Fear becomes associated to depression, resentment, self-isolation, individualism, even claustrophobia. But then he moves on to politics also, and he talks about how fear fosters right-wing populism, a menace to democracy, also brutality, and a form of societal control based on obedience, repression of speech, or even repression of critical thinking. In contrast to fear, hope provides tools that allow us to find meaning, to find orientation, and tools that invite us to start moving, so to be set in motion in search for our own path, and in a context in which we are situated, we are placed in a point at which or from which we can witness a horizon that is expanding into the future. These are signposts that, of course, move us to act. And these move us also to narrate such action to others. So these two are key verbs, key actions, action and narration, that will actually become axes around which his explanation will hinge. So I was saying that, and as you can still see on the screen, hope is very different from optimism, and is very different from pessimism, but also from positive thinking and positive psychology. And this is what he's explaining. And he is aligning both positive thinking and positive psychology with, I would say, symptoms of a neoliberal way of life. So in order to do this, Han explains how hope becomes a dialectical figure in relation with despair. And it means that the more negative the despair is, the deeper the hope. However, optimism is based on positivity and does not include an openness to other possibilities, but it is somehow placed at a point in which it is prefigured as being closed to any future, any new future, because you already know what future will bring, and it will be positivity. Pessimism is just its flip side, but on negativity. So neoliberalism, and he actually delves on this, operates at the bottom of this ideology of positivity, because what it does is to isolate individuals by making them responsible for their own happiness and disentangling them from other individuals, thus breaking out collectivity or communities into isolation. And this ideology, neoliberalism also, or positivity coming from neoliberalism, also forces people or individuals to reinvent themselves in an act of something that I have called alleged creativity, but whose only aim is simply a variation, a mutation, and a permutation of the same. Because in the end, the truth to be told, and this is what Hans says, is that difference is not welcome, but only having people, let me say, embedded or just following, being on the track, on believing that what they're doing is creating something new, but they are just perpetuating sameness. And this also reminds me of how algorithms in social media and algorithm in new social media work. They keep on performing permutations and mutations to provide alternatives, but without actually breaking the paradigm. Han describes, of course, the multiple kaleidoscopic features of hope by resorting to body images, but by resorting to so many different areas. And in this sense, let me move on to this next slide, in which we will spend much of my presentation. So he describes the features of hope by resorting to so many different, let me say, dimensions. First of all, I would like to highlight how he's using body images by saying that hope, and I'm quoting here, leans forward and listens attentively, end of quote. It is an active form of apperception, and it is also associated to movement in space, and of course, a natural inclination toward the future. But hope also has a highly contemplative component, and because as it is described by Han, it is a receptive mood. It is characterized by solidarity, empathy, dialogue, reconciliation, and understanding, of course, in a collectivity. This is not possible to be achieved in an isolated way. In this elaboration, Hans likens hope as a passion to love and trust, in the sense that they also emerge from this dialectic and share the same open horizon of possibilities and openness, transcending the individual into the collective. In this sense, I would like to stop for a moment in the list of, and there are many, the list of different dimensions that I have highlighted, that I have kind of found out. I have found out this isolation of time, this dimension of space, the dimension of language, the dimension of orientation, and the dimension of action. And all of these, of course, could be combined with many more, but they are, of course, very closely interrelated in a web. And in relation to this, I would like to also highlight this very interesting connection that I have found between this relationship between individuals and collectivity. I have connected with my previous work and the previous work that many of us in this project have carried out related to vulnerability and related to precarity, and the features of these two even states and ways of living, of being, with such a dialectic scheme on which hope rests, which is based on this absolute despair, and then it can move on to absolute hope. So why do I say this? Because Han, when he's trying to describe hope, he's talking about brokenness, and I'm quoting brokenness. He's talking about desperation. He's talking about fracture. In addition to that, we also have, this other component, the component of space, has also clear time dimension that Han describes. And in order to do so, he resorts to many authors. Actually, he resorts, as I said at the beginning, many authors. But in this particular moment, he resorts to Hannah Arendt's theory of action, which is based on counterposing forgiveness and promise. And in this sense, he's explaining how forgiveness leans towards the past, whereas promise looks to the future. And when he's trying to describe his own incarnation of hope, he's also presenting hope as a time description of the not yet. So the time incarnation of hope would be the not yet, that which is not yet here, but I know, or I feel that it will be here at some point. And this is what actually becomes my point of orientation in my movement. And this takes me to action. Action and acting for Han is, of course, an inherent feature of hope, in contrast to historical elaborations of the term that related to more passive visions of it. This leads him to distinguish between passive and active hope, as you all know. I'm going to move on to here. Passive hope is linked to wishes and mirrors historical account of hope, and in turn, active hope leads to action, becomes an invitation to take act, an invitation to grassroots organization, and ultimately to revolution. It reclaims people's agency by counteracting isolation that is often promoted by neoliberal ideologies and capitalism. It encourages collective action in an envisioning for a future that is not yet there. It is then a not yet a future moment, but it also fosters resistance, endurance that is sustained by this sense of direction. This form of hope, of course, brings light to the world. I am not particularly happy or comfortable with this description. I don't like this double balance on which he has placed hope, because the concept is actually a metaphor for dark versus light, and it brings back this long history of violence, of colonialism and oppression based on skin color, based on difference. So I am not really comfortable with this. I don't know. I really look forward to listening to what you feel about this. Then there is this other category, the category that he tries to describe, that he describes as in terms as absolute hope. It is based on the belief that there is meaning in things and that we are not alone. And it is based on a variation of the concept of time. Rather than the not yet, of course, it becomes the and yet. And by doing this, he's focusing on this dimension of resistance that is sustained by confidence, accompanying individuals or accompanying communities in this case, despite the many possibilities ahead, whether these possibilities are positive or are negative. The other interesting thing has to do with the idea that hope is described as a pre-linguistic condition. And that is to say, it motivates speech and it is deeply connected to literary creation. This form of narrative becomes expansive, becomes creative, and becomes imaginative in a sense that is not possible whenever we are under this regime of fear. He is following Bachmann, and he asserts, hope, I'm quoting, hope is a catalyst for writing. Poetry is a language of hope, end of quote. Quite interesting is the example taken from Kafka of the building of the wall, and how such, and I'm quoting, endless building of the wall creates a stable community by uniting the whole people in the spirit of hope. The wall is not really for the protection of the people against external enemies, end of quote. Of course, you can imagine that I read this very differently, particularly in the upheaval of will building worldwide with the recent events happening in the US and other events having happened in the history of humanity, of course. I interpret such metaphor as the emergence of a collective soul that ethnocentrically views the world and views the other. So I've got a question here that I will be asking you later on. Han presents hope under multiple forms and shapes. And you can see that here. It is a passion, it is a mood, it is a special state of mind dependent on attention, on intention, and attitude. And I just want to bring attention to these three elements, which are, as let me say them again, attention, intention, and attitude. These three elements, of course, can be used to describe mindfulness practice. I am a practitioner of mindfulness, and these are three key elements that are usually employed to describe mindfulness practice: attention, intention, and attitude. But he also adds many others. He adds it as a mood, as a virtue, as a state of mind, as a condition of existence, and he keeps on adding. So I have just selected some, there are others. And well, I would like to move on to close my presentation, because as I said, I don't want to go or spend more than 25 minutes on this. I have selected some of the questions that this text sparked when I was reading, and I would like to, well, ask you what you think about these questions, or maybe you've got other ideas that you would like to comment on. But the first question that came to my mind was, is there a way of approaching hope that is not complicit with metaphors much employed by oppressive regimes, such as dark versus light? In this sense, you may have noticed the very religious tone of his writing, and how he was talking about redemption. He was talking about this metaphor of birth and in Christmas and all that. So I don't know, I was not comfortable with this, and I thought that that was not going to be something I could use for my research. Another question would be, why needs such collective soul be built upon the separation from the other? Is community building only possible on xenophobic and difference building? Is really the idea of this metaphor that he takes from the wall building useful? It is really, for me, it is very not really fortunate choice. And the last one is enhanced use of human agency. He seems to leave out the more than human. So I have noticed this, even his examples of the dog and the tiger, and how he was kind of at some point suggesting he was denying agency, so to say, to these more than human beings. So is his vision reduced to, sorry, that is a mistake, an anthropocentric stance? So these were my ideas, and this is all I wanted to share with you today. And well, I don't know if there is something that you would like to comment on this. I will stop sharing my screen now. And as I said, it's the time now for all of you who want to comment to put your hand up, and I will be very happy to activate your mics and, I don't know, start a brief discussion that can take for as long as, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes, so that we can at 11 more or less start with the presentation of the second set of texts. There are many ideas that I had to leave out because I wanted to present, of course, the most important ideas in 20 minutes, and it's really difficult to do so. I don't know what you think. Sylvia, she wanted to speak. So Sylvia, I have now activated your mic. So if you want to speak, just click on the icon of your mic, and then you will be able to speak. Sylvia, I don't hear you. Are you speaking? Can you hear her, or is it me? Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, finally. Sorry about that. Well, good morning, everyone. I am very pleased to be here. I'm also very pleased to be part of this wonderful team. Thank you very much for your presentation, Cristina. Looking forward to hear Leonor coming up next. I was really taken by these two readings that you shared with us. So thank you for choosing them. It really got me about thinking about so many things, which is what I think is the purpose, to have make people think about what is it that we have in our hands. And the first thing that I thought about was, as an individual, I mean, because we are in a world of ideas and theses and very theoretical instances, and it has to be there because we have to be giving a structure to our ideas and to be able to communicate them. And so my idea was, how do I fit as a human being from my privacy, from my own everyday choices, and through my connection with other beings and with Mother Earth, whatever is out there. How do I fit within all this? You know, I was very taken by Han's comment on page. I'm going to be specific here. Let me see. It's the third page of the Prelude, and you mentioned this, Cristina, when he says the cult of positivity isolates people. You know, and I have the feeling that because we are in the kind of societies that we are, we tend to see everything in structures of double net. The opposite generate our perception of the world. And it is important to have, as Han says, a dialectic approach, but I would also put forward the need to have a dialogic approach. And that would counteract this isolation. Because not really only goodness inside can provoke or move changing others, but it's also the connection with the outer world. So for me, hope is a movement that begins in a very individual way, that shapes the choices and the perceptions I have about all these dualities, and encourages me to move towards unity and the collective. But I want to stress, and I finish with this, that it is required to go beyond the opposite, that the action is personal first, that the choices are there, that you really have to stand up for what you believe in, and then somehow the miracle happens and it transmits to others. And the others question their perceptions, and the ball keeps rolling and rolling. So I would just like to leave this, you know, today with a good idea of this, because in this concept of hope as like the Latin root in Spanish from esperanza is esperare. Esperare, good things are coming. But we need to also make them happen. You know, so it is our responsibility to choose to go beyond the opposite or to follow the trend and get lost in the dialect. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. I liked very much the way in which you were connecting the individual to the collectivity. I think that the next person to raise her hand was Maria Porras. So Maria, whenever you want, you can activate your mic and speak. And then next will be Carolina, I think. Yes.
Okay, I thought Lucia had her hand raised a while ago, a minute ago.
Really? I think that it was raised from the previous, before we started.
From the previous intervention.
That is why if that was not the case, please, Lucia, tell me, because I was not intending to silence you in any way.
Oh, sorry, it was my mistake.
But I don't think so. I think it was just that.
Okay,
so Maria, whenever you want.
So, Cristina, let me thank you for your super introduction to Byung-Chul Han's ideas on hope borrowed and and his own ideas too. I think your intro was fantastic, and you unpacked so many things, and you actually I think you were very wise to see the gaps, some gaps in his approach as well, that I had failed to see myself. And so your presentation was really useful for me to understand that and to see those cracks, those fractures in the discourse, although also highlighting the most important points. And I think, nevertheless, it's a very useful text for us and for our couple, since he brings into the light many of the thinkers that have used the notion of hope. So I think it's a very nice first approach to our topic, to the topic of this seminar, and I think it's going to be very useful for students, or I hope again that is going to be very useful, since it brings into the light very simply, but also wisely. I don't think it's a simplistic or over simplistic text, but I think it's a good summary of many ideas that can be expanded and elaborated in more detail by other authors, perhaps, or by other works by Byung-Chul Han in the future. Who knows? I was also thinking that sometimes I have the same impression that you mentioned at the beginning, that it's difficult to follow his direction. And I haven't read the whole book, but I intend to do so. So perhaps it will be clearer in the future. But for me, it was difficult to understand where was he and where were the others. That is, what were his own words, his own ideas versus the others. It's very, I think it's very direct with Arendt, for instance, establishing another position different than Arendt's, but not with the rest. So sometimes I have problems saying, okay, this is Byung-Chul Han saying this, or is this Bloch, or is this another Spinoza, or is another philosopher? So I have problems differentiating that, and that is a problem with me, for me, with this text, in order to use it, because I don't know who's who. I need to know who are all these people before trying to differentiate, and that's difficult because our time and knowledge is limited. Anyway, back to one of the questions you were asking us, the first one, about the problematic dichotomy, light versus darkness. Definitely is very problematic, I think, too. And I think it also has to do with how he presents the regimes of fear that stem from dystopia. Okay, because he's very clear about that. Dystopia brings fear and activates fear, and fear goes nowhere, right? It only brings all the evil issues that you have pointed out. And he refers to dystopian narratives, to dystopian scenarios, quoting Max Fisher, and Children of Men, that movie that opens the most famous essay by Fisher, in which he half quotes Zizek and half quotes Jameson, saying that it is easier to imagine the end of the world than imagine the end of capitalism, which is, for me, it's a central question as well in our project. Why is it easier to think at the end of the world as something so reachable? But at the same time, later on, he's going on to argue that the collapse of narratives will destroy the world. But I think for me, there's a contradiction with what he was saying before, quoting Fisher about dystopian narratives, because there is a proliferation of that. And eventually narratives like that might end up destroying our imagination for imagining potential futures alternative to destruction. So for me, that is problematic. I think a very important contradiction that affects us as literary scholars as well. So I don't know how to handle that, and perhaps you have more ideas on this, and I want I would like to know your views on this. And also got me into thinking how it's so beautiful to read hope is a catalyst for writing, poetry is a language of hope. It's beautiful, and I want to print a t-shirt with that message. But at the same time, is you are all the time pointing at the dangers of daydreaming, of wishing, of individualism, but there is nothing more individualistic than writing. And writing is a wish, actually, that perhaps can inspire others into wishing or hoping for better things. But I think I don't know, or I don't see how, or is not explicitly elaborated how a personal wish that is writing can prompt collective hope, or at least this is not. This is a wishful thinking on my part. I want that to be true, but I don't see that elaborated in the text, or perhaps it's elsewhere. But it's a question that brings me back into the problem dark versus light, because definitely this is a very awful metaphor for the absolute hope. I think there is or at least you said that also the idea of giving birth can be negative, but I prefer that one. Because there's following Arendt and following Bloch, there is more potential in that very idea, because all the future is condensed in the idea of giving birth. So perhaps as a metaphor, it doesn't have to be connected to light and darkness. Birth is not. I think it doesn't have to be from darkness stems something to light, and darkness gives birth to light. I don't know. I don't think that is the metaphor that works with giving birth, but perhaps I'm wrong. Giving birth, being reborn, can be also problematic. Make America great again, being reborn to a new world. So it can be very problematic too, indeed. So these were my initial thoughts, a bit formless, sorry, but shapeless. But well, I hope they come from some kind of discussion later. Looking forward listening to the rest of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. I really liked your ideas. I don't want to answer to any of your questions. I've got an answer, but I don't want to answer because I want to give the space to other participants. And I'm looking for in the list. I'm looking for Carolina, but I cannot find her now because I want to activate her mic. But I don't know why I missed her. Carolina, I'm looking for her. Where, Carolina, where are you? Let me look for her. Or maybe, Leonor, you found her and you can do that. Where is Carolina? Or maybe it's with Macarena, that's why? Or is that the reason why? Is it, the two of them were together. Can I activate Macarena's mic? Yes. Then Macarena, you can activate your mic. Okay, just activate, you can just click on the icon. It doesn't work? Well, what I can do is next, I saw Belén raise her hand and then Francisco Márquez. So, and then Susana. So, and then Patricia. So what I can do is I will go with Belen, and then maybe I can return to you just in case. Belen, whenever you want. I cannot hear you. Your mic is activated. No, no.
Okay, so sorry for this inconvenience. I'm using Macarena's connection. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your wonderful reading of Hans' text, which I agree leaves some gaps, okay, that we need to confront. I have two comments. One of them has to do with more theoretical engagements of Hans' texts with, for instance, other when you mentioned, or when the text mentions the not yet, that I like to connect with other questionings of temporality and chrononormativity that within the field of queer studies so hegemonic and the goal-oriented rhythms. Okay, so I found nice connections, okay, with other theoretical paradigms dealing with time, with chronology, with rhythms. So I like that. And the other comment has to do with a more down-to-earth application of Hans' ideas. While I was reading the text that you uploaded on the web, I was watching the Bishop of Washington that confronted the technological and materialistic and consumerist patriarchal version of hope represented by Trump's administration. And I found that somehow her version of hope that somehow addressed empathy, spirituality, interdependence, connection, was somehow aligned with Hans' critique of this contemporary model of hope dominated by production, efficiency, consumption. Okay, well, it's just it was just a connection of ideas. Okay, that went into my mind while I was reading both texts. Okay, and well, I found that it's that our research also illuminates how we interpret what is now happening in the world. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, I think maybe Belen can speak if she can activate her mic, and if not, we go to Francisco. But let me see. Let's see. Belen, does it work? Let's go then to Francisco.
Okay, can I speak?
Yes, of course.
Okay, well, first of all, I just wanted to thank you for your presentation, for the whole organization of this course. I just wanted to highlight how Hans' work is really beneficial for my doctoral dissertation in progress, because I am interested in the area of hope studies. And it's also true that I want to focus on Catholic authors from the British and American literary environment. And it's interesting because Han addresses many aspects that concerns the Hope studies in a secular way, right? But he also has a background of Catholic theology, and so he has these concepts such as light versus darkness, redemption, and it's interesting for me because what I am planning for my state of the art is the outline of the differences between secular and religious hope. But it is also true that this author offers, well, the things that they both have in common, just like the need for an active hope, or other aspects that I have taken notes about. Just like that, this hope cannot be lived out in isolation. We both secular and religious people understand that hope happens in a community, and that's it. Thank you a lot.
Thank you very much for highlighting this communal dimension of hope, which is key in describing actually that term. And thank you for your intervention. Next is, if Belen cannot do it, because I keep on. Yes,
I think, yeah,
are.
now? Okay,
Yes.
finally. Thank you so much. And thank you also for your presentation, Cristina. It was so inspiring. Like, thank you so much. Okay, so basically I wanted to also connect this with some theory that I was thinking about when you were asking us how to escape from these dualistic traditional metaphors of hope. And basically I was thinking a lot about this work by Jack Halberstam, The Queer Art of Failure, and like resignifying traditional binaries we are so used to that we do not even question ourselves. So in this way, in this sense, I was just thinking that it could be really helpful if we detach from this notion of hope within optimistic frameworks, no? Like, it's not me saying this, of course, like I am taking this from Sarah Ahmed, The Promise of Happiness, but also from, for example, Lauren Berlant in Cruel Optimism. And it's this idea of not picturing hope as unachievable, a static or a fixed result that we need to conquer in this like colonialist tendency, like from neoliberal capitalistic times, but of course this comes from before. And I would say that maybe it's helpful to go against these dualistic traditional metaphors, to picture hope more in a non-linear, in a generative and open-ending way. And of course, I take this from another author, that is Brian Masumi, in The Principle of Unrest. And I like very much his proposal to see hope as this orientation just to the possibility of change, just like as an active attunement to the unfolding of the unknown. So we don't really need to think about hope in these, I don't know, demanding ways of needing it to be something happy, but just, yeah, like as a communal force and an inclination towards the future and towards what can come. So I just wanted to say that, very theoretical, but I was thinking about all these people and I wanted to share them with you, and that's it.
Well, thank you very much, because all these authors are actually key for our understanding of the work that we have ahead of us in the project. So thank you very much. Next is, I think that Susana. And next, I took note of Patricia Santos, but now I don't see her hand up. Maybe, I don't know. But first, Susana. So, okay, fantastic. First Susana, then Patricia, then Mar. Susana, whenever you want, you can activate your mic.
Okay, hello. Well, I hope that you can listen to me because there are some works in the building. So hopefully I will have just a few minutes to say some things that I would like to address. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Cristina, for your presentation. It was, well, as usual, illuminating and illustrative for all of us. I enjoyed very much reading Hall's text. It's true that I agree with you that there are like, well, obscurity and some elements that are not very much probably well addressed, such as the ideas of light and darkness. I totally agree with you and Carolina that it's probably not a very good, accurate metaphor or reference to explain what he wanted to convey. But it's true that I have enjoyed very much his reference to collectivity and how hope is associated to not being isolated. Particularly, that is very much interesting for my plays. As you know, the playwrights that I usually work with talks about action and fight with resistance. So that definition of hope, that feature of hope, is very much entangled with my corpus. So thank you very much, Cristina, for that. I just wanted to say that I have doubts about Hans' dichotomy between fear and hope, in the sense of being different in the idea of isolation and collectivity, because Han insists, I think, a lot on the idea of fear not being collective. He says literally that fear is an individual feeling. And I don't agree with that. I mean, we have a lot of examples in history, such as the pandemics or preventive wars and so on. Fear is very much collective. So I don't think that distinction is very fruitful, possibly for generalizations. So maybe in some cases fear is individual, but also hope can be individual if we are extrapolating the same thing. So as I said, I had some agreements with him in some parts, but I also disagree in others. And I want to leave the floor to others. So that's just what I wanted to say. Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you very much, Susana. And thank you for noting that this assumption is really something that we also need to, cast a doubt on. It is really interesting. Next is Patricia Santos. So Patricia, whenever you want, you can open your mic.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Cristina, for your wonderful presentation. As you were saying in the beginning, for me, it was also quite confusing, Hans' reading, because I also had the impression that it was jumping from one concept to the other, was kind of clarifying.
Patricia, we lost you. Patricia. Okay. Okay, so what I am going to do, meanwhile Patricia joins back or whatever, Mar, the floor is yours. I have already given you access to your mic, so click on your icon and on the icon of your mic, and then you can talk. Meanwhile,
Okay, thank you.
Patricia rejoins us.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Because and I have a lot of problems right now, especially with my voice, but I hope you can hear me okay. Well, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation, Cristina. And I was really intrigued by the text, especially of course you have pointed out the ruptures or the fractures in the text very wisely. But I wanted to go back to the notion of spirituality, as you know, that it relates so much to what I've been doing in my work in recent years, because for me what was really I was taken really by that notion of the spirit of transcendence that hope may entail, right? of course, now I understand that he has this background in Catholic theology, because I was like, okay, where is this coming from, right? So that is kind of interesting. And it's also quite inspiring, at least for me. It's like almost at the end of this text, when he even quotes St. Paul's, St. Paul saying, Abraham, that he against hope, believed in hope, which it may sound contradictory, but at the same time, I think it's very much part of what Han's philosophy is trying to, get at. I mean, I think that what really interested me in the text is precisely those contradictions, right? Those gaps, that because the problem obviously is that where he is positioning himself is from the binaries, right? That is the real problem. He is not able to go beyond the Judeo-Christian tradition, etc., etc., etc. But at the same time, I think that's why it's also, motivating in a way, if you see what I mean by it. And the other thing I wanted to relate, well, of course, I was also, and I think I need to read the book to understand this better. Because he's always playing on this kind of vita activa, vita contemplativa, right? But you see one very tiny part of that in this chapter. So I guess I need to read the text and then go back to something I think Carolina has pointed out to, the notion of interdependence, of course, because I mean, community, human beings, no, we live, related to each other. We actually are born thanks to another human being, right? And then we grow thanks to the others. So to the others that are us too, right? So that the notion of collectivity that I think, of course, I was thinking about Ubuntu, the African philosophy of Ubuntu, that we are not without the others, in fact, no? And of course, Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu's book about that, no? The idea that hope is what makes it makes us livable as human beings, no? So that is, I think, also quite, for me, it's quite intriguing, in fact. And last but not least, I know I've been working also on the notion of home a lot, and he says also at a certain, this is almost at the end, excuse me, at the end of the text too, he talks about literally, I'm quoting, hope makes housing possible. It promises a house, a homeland, and that is very problematic. I mean, we need to debate more about what makes lives livable, which obviously takes us back to Pater and everybody else, and precarity, of course, precarity paradigms, but also this idea of home. How do we feel at home, and with whom, and we feel at home. So that were my thoughts. That I think it was really a very, very interesting text. So thank you so much for proposing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, thank you so much, Mar. Let's try to regain connection with Patricia. And we are closing with Patricia this session of intervention, because I would like to give the floor to Leonor with her set of texts. But first of all, before we go on with Leonor, let's have Patricia, if she can share with us her ideas. I guess it was her connection that was not working. Okay, but Patricia, no. No way, right? Okay, so if she can't speak now, maybe she will be able to join us whenever we are holding the debate in which we are having the two texts talk to each other. maybe then, and we can give the floor now to Leonor. Is that okay? So Leonor, you are the co-organizer. You should be able to share everything now, I think. And what we are going to be doing is the same as I said at the beginning. Leonor will be presenting for around 20 minutes, and then she will throw some questions for us to debate in order to talk about the potential of Bogard's text. And in the last part of it, after we have talked about that, we can draw any conferences, alliances, or points of departure between these two texts. Leonor, whenever you want. Do I need to do something, or you are ready?
Can you hear me? Is it okay?
Yes.
Yes. Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I think I can still say good morning. It's almost 20 past 11. So thank you, Cristina, for your wonderful presentation. I didn't say a word about your presentation. So before I start presenting the new concept that we are going to be addressing over the next 20 minutes, which is the concept of solastalgia, I'd like to thank you for giving us such a thorough description, such a thorough summary of a concept which is extremely difficult to understand, extremely difficult to define. That's the reason why I think there are so many gaps in Han's text. What we can see in his book is a mind struggling with words, with concepts, with metaphors, trying to come up with a working definition of hope. So that's something that I wanted to say, but well, maybe we can resume discussion of the concept of hope as proposed by Han later on. So let me try and share my screen. Let's see whether it works.
We can see your screen now.
Okay, so you can see my screen now. I can't see you. So I trust you'll be there, listening, paying attention to what I'm going to be saying. So
here we are, Leonor, hopeful.
Okay, thank you. So I should probably begin by saying thank you. Thank you to all my colleagues. Thank you to all the PhD candidates and students that have decided to spend some of the precious time with us this morning. As you can see, the first slide of my presentation is strikingly similar to Cristina's first slide. And there's a reason for that. The reason being that we have coordinated with each other so that this presentation was coherent as much as possible, right? So I've called it an impromptu meditation on solastalgia. So we would probably be in a position to understand why I have decided to call my talk like this later on. So let me begin by answering a very simple question. Why solastalgia? Why am I interested in this concept? Why are we, as members of the same research group, interested in this emergent concept? Well, I can think of at least three reasons. The first one is that to us, it is a fascinating critical concept. It is a fascinating tool that might help us better understand certain cultural and literary are also cultural artifacts, and is profoundly connected to the concept of hope, and also profoundly connected to the concept of the Capitalocene, which is the core concept around which many other concepts pivot in our project. So that's the main reason. But there's a second reason, and the second reason to me is that there's a lot of promise and power to the concept of solastalgia to better understand the emotional responses of humanity to the current environmental crisis. Let me remind you of the etymology of the word crisis. As you probably know, this is a Greek origin word, and the original meaning of the word in Greek is change. So a time of crisis is a time of profound changes, and we are witnesses of profound changes in our society worldwide nowadays. And the third reason is that hope studies, to me, that's just my hunch, my impression, hope studies are an emergent field of research. And there's a reason for that as well. The reason being, again, that there is a close connection between the environmental crisis we're witnessing today, an increased interest in human emotions, and a focus on literary and cultural studies from a different position, from somewhere else. It's nowadays possible to look at cultural, literary artifacts, different kinds of texts in different formats and media through different critical approaches. And I think Hope studies, alongside post-humanism and eco-criticism in its many fashions, is extremely powerful. So there's a lot of intellectual power in Hope studies, I think, to better understand not just what we human beings are doing to the world, but also how we are responding to a time of crisis by creating different cultural artifacts, different cultural products. That was meant to be an introduction. Now let me introduce you to the structure, the architecture of my presentation. Well, this is not going to be a traditional talk. It's going to be more a conversation than a presentation. So feel free to interrupt me whenever you want to contribute any idea that might cross your mind any minute, right? So again, I have divided my presentation into three parts, my conversation into three different parts. First of all, I'd like to address the concept of solastalgia. And at this point, I will have to refer you to two very important books. One of them was written by Glenn Albrecht. It sounds like a German surname. It's not Albrecht, but Albrecht. Earth Emotions, which was published in 2019, and Paul Bogard Solastalgia, which was published just a couple of years ago. So as you can see, these are very recent books. We're just riding the crest of the wave, right? Then I'd like to have a look at the etymology of the word solastalgia, because it's an interesting word. Probably one of the first words that comes to mind is nostalgia. So solastalgia is a neologism that has been created by analogy with nostalgia. So I'd like to have a look at the etymology, and I'd like to have a look at the definition that was originally provided by Albrecht and then later on by Paul Bogard. So I'm going to invite you to accompany me in an exercise in semantic archaeology. Then I'd like to draw a simple anatomy of solastalgia. Again, it's a complex concept. It is closely related to the concept of hope. There are lots of dimensions and components that seem to be common to both concepts, as we'll see in a few minutes as well. And then I will tell you a bit more about what I've called 34 tessera in a mosaic. You will understand that in a minute. So that's going to be the first part. That's going to be really the core of my conversation. Then I'd like to move on to what I've called two takes on solastalgia, because you have to read three texts. One of them is the introduction to Paul Bogard's book, and then you have two short chapters. One of them was even shorter than the other one. So the first chapter is a return to film. Those of you who are, still young, but not so young anymore, probably think of a very well-known album, The Return to Innocence, a song. You probably have heard that song. If not, I have to encourage you to listen to that song straight away, right after we finish our seminar. So A Return to Film. So this somehow evokes a very well-known song. And the second chapter is Paul Bogard's One Path to Solastalgia, which is only 4 pages long. It's a very short meditation on what Bogard thinks solastalgia is all about. So at that point, I'd like to invite you to go for a walk with me, and we'll be reading some illuminated excerpts from those 2 chapters. And finally, if you're not tired, I'd like to give you some extra food for thought and propose some questions for a shared debate and discussion. So that's the plan for the next 20 minutes. So what is solastalgia? Well, let me introduce you to the man behind the concept, one of the 2 men behind this concept. This is Paul Bogard. He was born in Minnesota, And he says that he grew up exploring the forest and watching the stars near a lake in the northern part of the state. It's interesting to see how both Albrecht in his native Australia and Bogard in his native Minnesota had wonderful experiences in their childhood. And those experiences had a tremendous impact on the fashioning of their own identity and their own thought about ecology. Well, he's not just a professional writer. He's been writing books for quite a long while. He's also an associate professor of English and environmental studies at one university in Minnesota. As I said before, he has written several books. He has also edited some anthologies. Actually, the book that we're going to discuss today, Solastalgia, is an anthology of texts that he has edited. And he's very interested in how we as a species relate to the non-human world, or to what David Abram, a very important eco-philosopher, calls the more than human world, with a very interesting focus, which I think is fascinating, on the night sky, on artificial light pollution, the ground, and the awe-inspiring presence of other earth dwellers. The kind of writing that you find in his books is completely different from the kind of writing that you find in Han's writing. Hans originally writes in German. His books have been translated into French, into Spanish, into English. It's curious to see, it's interesting to see how his books seem to be more readily available in Spanish and French than in English. There might be a reason, a cultural reason for that. But anyway, it's interesting to see how Paul Bogard is an eco-scholar. So for lack of a better label, I'm just taking the liberty to call him eco-scholar. Well, some people say that he's the unofficial laureate poet of dark skies. Let me show you a very interesting article that he published not so long ago. This was published in the New York Times on the 20th of June, 2023. We're watching the sky as we know it disappear. And I'd like to share a short excerpt with you. So look at the second paragraph, right? Not the first one. This is going to be available for you. So skip the first paragraph and just focus on the second one. It says, new research suggests that wind patterns and cloud formation are growing increasingly erratic. In some places, we have too much rain, in others, too little. Huge wildfire smoke events are becoming more common. The list of changes occurring above us, spurred on in part by burning fossil fuels, is long and getting longer. It means we must now contemplate the more frequent loss of our blue skies. When the Australian philosopher Glenn Albrecht coined the term solastalgia about 2 decades ago to describe a form of grief he later defined as the lived experience of the desolation of a much-loved landscape, he wasn't thinking specifically about the sky, but he might as well have been. Already, many of us are experiencing something previously unimaginable. We are homesick for the sky. Paul Bogard has said publicly that he was very proud of this essay that was published 2 years ago. And well, if you read the whole thing, the whole text, you will understand why. So for a long time, he's been interested in dark, in night skies, in starry skies, but now he seems to have directed his attention to daytime skies. So as you can see, he keeps an eye both on night skies, on daytime sky, and stays alert to extremely erratic atmospheric phenomena. What those phenomena are telling us time and again, is that anthropogenic action is changing the Earth in its entirety. There's no spot on Earth that can escape the impact of human action. And well, Bogard, like Albrecht, like Han, like many other people who seem to be sensitive to what we're doing to the planet, cannot but respond. And the response is thinking and writing. I'd like to address one of the questions posed by our colleague Maria Porras about how writing can change the world for the better, by the way. Later on, I'll do that later on. So we are homesick for the sky. That's what Paul Bogard says. And the point is that the signs of the sky are the signs of our time. And the signs that we see in the sky are alarming signs that something wrong and we need to do something about it, right? There's no looking back, there's not looking forward into the deep future. We need to cope with what we are doing to the planet right now. So let me show you some beautiful book covers of the books that Paul Bogard has been writing to date. The first one is The End of Night. This is not an anthology, this is a monograph that he wrote entirely by himself, searching for natural darkness in a niche of artificial light. So you can see the focus is crystal clear. He's interested in how light pollution is diverting people's attention from what really matters. I was thinking about the amount of time that we spend looking up the sky on an ordinary day. So just think about yourselves. Do you take the trouble to raise your eyes and look up at the sky up above our heads? Do you? And what about night skies and starry skies? They are not starry anymore because light pollution prevents us from having access to the grandeur of a starry sky. So as you can see, from the very beginning, Bogard seems to be intent on exploring the skies, at night and also in the daytime. The second book that he wrote was Solastalgia, which is the one we're going to be discussing. As I said, it's an anthology that was edited by Paul Bogard in 2023. So you can see the subtitle reads as follows: An Anthology of Emotion in a Disappearing World. An Anthology of Emotion in a Disappearing World. He could have called it something like a map of emotion in a disappearing world, because what you have in this book is a polyphonic work of nonfiction. You have different kinds of chapters, different kinds of works of nonfiction that have been contributed by many different kinds of people coming from different backgrounds, different professions, as we'll see. But look at the beauty of the book covers. I wanted to draw your attention just to the beauty of the covers and also of the titles. The third book that he edited was Let There Be Night, Testimony on Behalf of the Dark. A beautiful book cover again. And that was his second anthology. So remember the first one, The End of Night, that was his first monograph. Solastalgia was his first edited volume. Let There Be Night is his second edited volume, and The Ground Beneath Us is his second monograph. Another very interesting book that I'm very much looking forward to being able to read. From the oldest cities to the last wilderness, what dirt tells us about who we are. It's a beautiful cover again. But as you can see, there's a thread that runs through all of these books. It's always the same. This is Bogard expressing how amazed he is at the beauty, at the grandeur, the fragility, the vulnerability of the earth. And two more books, children books. Well, the second one. The second one, What If Night, by Paul Bogard, illustrated by Sarah Holden, that is intended for children. So that's aimed at children, directed towards an audience made up of children. And then you have To Know a Starry Night, which is illustrated with photographs by Paul Bogard. So as you can see, if I go back again to, okay, I don't know how to go back, sorry. Well, I'll move forward, don't worry. So let's talk about solastalgia. Solastalgia, a difficult word, a curious word, to say the least. I'd like to begin by saying a few words about Heraclitus, the old philosopher from Asia Minor. He lived in the 5th century before the Common Era in what is nowadays Turkey, right? And he used a very well-known metaphor, the metaphor of the river, to talk about how metamorphosis, perpetual change, is the mark of everything that exists. And you may be wondering why I mentioned Heraclitus in relation to Solastalgia, and there's a reason for that. It might seem a bit far-fetched, but it makes sense. I'll tell you why. Heraclitus said that it was not possible to step twice into the same river. Why? Because the person has changed from one second to the next. And so has the river. So the river and the person trying to step twice into the river, even though it's the same river, have dramatically changed. Because everything is in perpetual, constant change in our world. So my hunch is that Solastalgia is one of those books where you can step into as many times as you wish, because it's akin to a forest where you are somehow invited to get lost in. So you can start reading Solastalgia by looking at the introduction by Paul Bogard, or you can just start in medias res. You just can go to the final chapter. It's up to you to decide in which way you're going to read this book. Because this book is a treasure house, a map of emotions that have been contributed by many different kinds of people from many different walks of life. The point is that you may step into this book in many different ways. But what I know for a fact is that once you step out of this book, you come out of the book with an enhanced awareness of the fragility and aching beauty of this disappearing earth. So once you are confronted with the testimonies that have been provided by so many intelligent and sensitive people, you cannot but feel that you have been illuminated. So it's illumination that you gain from a close and attentive reading of this book. Well, you know that the more than human world is under threat. That seems to be just a truism, but every now and then we need to be reminded of such things, lest we don't start taking action to change things for the better. And well, we will all agree on a simple thing, a simple fact, which is that it is a matter of the utmost urgency to stop and listen to what we feel as a species when confronted with loss, as it manifests in lots of different scenarios and contexts and settings, in degraded ecosystems, in lost biodiversity and species extinction, in natural catastrophes. Just think about what happened in Spain very recently. Think about the Dana in Valencia. Rising temperatures, pollution, toxicity, wildfires in California. I mean, there's no spot on Earth that is immune to catastrophe, human-induced catastrophes, right? And if you think about it just for a couple of minutes, you will realize that the litany of environmental woes is simply endless. So this is a book that we need to read, if only because this book brings together, gathers responses by highly articulate and intelligent and sensitive people. Okay, let me show you a letter that Bogard sent to potential contributors to this book. He gave them very simple instructions. This is what he told them. I'm interested in how you are feeling. I'm interested especially in those times when you feel such emotions as anxiety, fear, and sorrow, and what you do to respond. I want to know how you simultaneously carry such powerful emotions as love and fear, joy and grief, anger and hope. What are the ways we can live a joyful life while still being engaged with a future that threatens overwhelming change? How can we use our feelings about a disappearing world to create a positive narrative for the life and lives to come? As you can see, I have underlined and highlighted some key words: anxiety, fear, sorrow, love and fear, joy and grief, anger and hopes. They are very interesting constellations, a very interesting constellation of emotions. They probably bring to mind some of the concepts that have been wonderfully presented by Cristina in our previous talk. One of the most moving things about Bogard's own account about how he invited different people to contribute to his book, is the fact that he underlines author's generosity. At first, they were a bit puzzled. What kind of question is that? What kind of guidelines are you giving me? You're asking me about how I feel when confronted with the alarming deterioration of the planet, with the current unprecedented environmental crisis. So the result was, not surprisingly, a jewel. The anthology consists of 34 different texts contributed by educators, journalists, poets, and scientists, texts that articulate and share their emotions in the face of environmental crisis. So when you put them together, what you have is 34 different takes, 34 different interpretations of a single concept, the concept of solastalgia. And to me, those 34 texts, those 34 responses are like tessera in a fascinating mosaic. The 34 writers that were involved in this project were free to experiment with the genre that best suited their emotional needs. So as a result, the responses were extremely varied. A letter to a child, a short essay of scene and reflection, a testimony, a rant, something more philosophical. The result I've called lyric eco nonfiction, or lyric eco prose, for lack of a better label again. It is a kind of writing that is pervaded by a very intense lyricism. This is poetic prose, okay? This is poetry that resembles prose, prose that aspires to the condition of poetry. And what is even more interesting is that there is a common substratum running through the entire book. And that common denominator is what Australian philosopher Glenn Albrecht calls solastalgia, in a book that had been published 4 years earlier, Earth Emotions, New Words for a New World, 2019. So let me give you a very simple definition of the concept. Solastalgia is defined, and I quote, as the homesickness that we feel while still at home. So you can see it may sound like a paradox. How is it possible to feel homesickness when you're still at home? Because home is changing, and it is not the same place anymore. So the pain, the longing that we feel as we realize that the world immediately around us is changing, with our love for that world serving as a catalyst for action on its behalf. That is solastalgia. That is a simple working definition of the concept. There are lots of things that somehow connect solastalgia to the concept of hope as expounded by Han. Look at the words used by Paul Bogard and by Glenn Albrecht. We have love, we have action, we have responsibility, we have commitment. One of the things Cristina said about hope that I cannot agree more with is that hope is probably the alternative, not one of the alternatives, but the alternative to the predatory systems that are fostered and cultivated by neoliberalism. So let's have a look at a more sophisticated definition of solastalgia, if I may. This is how the book opens. So if you have a look at the introduction written by Bogard, I'm not sure whether you were able to read the first page of the introduction. I'm very sorry that the text is a very poor quality text. So I have just transcribed the first paragraph for you. So this is what solastalgia is all about. It is the distress caused by environmental change, the homesickness we feel while still at home, the lived experience of the desolation of a much loved landscape. It is the emotion so many feel in response to finding our beloved world so impacted, under threat, and certain to suffer radical change. In other words, to feel solastalgia is to feel pain, sorrow, and grief from the Greek algia, but it is also to recognize that the source of this pain is our love for the places of which we are a part, and in that love lies the energy to defend the world. So pain is a catalyst for change, and love is a catalyst for change. This is beautiful. Look at the note. The notes that you will see on some of my slides, or in some of my slides, are just mental notes and kind reminders for myself. But I wanted to make them visible for you so that you can follow my thread of thinking, because this is, complex and abstract thinking. So what I find most interesting about this, the opening paragraph of the book, is that solastalgia is exactly what I've said. It is a catalyst for action in the face of climate crisis. It instills in us a sense of responsibilities. It somehow gently pushes us to act on behalf of the earth. And this is a question that we may want to address later on. I was wondering if solastalgia is an emotion, if it is an emotion, it is somehow stored in the primitive part of our brain. Is it a survival mechanism that seeks to ensure the preservation of the biosphere as life's oikos, as the house of life, both human and non-human life? Is it a mechanism that is intrinsic to human beings that somehow pushes us to do something to protect the earth from us, from what we are doing to the planet? That's a question we may want to return to later on. So if it is an emotion, and it is obvious that it is an emotion, is it a survival mechanism? Because, emotions, all emotions play a key role in ensuring the survival of our species. Emotions are not to be confused with feelings. As feelings are a cultural construct or a cultural construction, whereas emotions are universal. They can be found anywhere on earth. Whenever you find human beings, you're bound to find emotions, and they are the same, they are universal. So that was the definition provided by Paul Bogard in the first paragraph of his introduction. But let me go back to the beginning of the story, because the story in the introduction begins in medias res as well. So we need to go back to 2019, even to much earlier, to the beginnings of the 2000s, because it was in the mid-2000s that Albrecht coined and started circulating the term solastalgia for the first time. He addresses the concept in Earth Emotions and in other writings, but it was Albrecht and his wife that decided to create a new word to refer to a new concept for which the English language was lacking. He realized that there was no word to refer to the kind of pain and suffering experienced by people whose more immediate ecosystem was being besieged and threatened by, forces beyond their control. Albrecht is a bird-loving environmental philosopher trying to understand Earth-human relationships. That's how he defines himself. So he self-defines as an environmental philosopher and a prominent, relevant contemporary philosopher, by the way. Early in his childhood, which he spent in Western Australia, he developed a profound sense of kinship to a non-human being. Does it ring a bell to you? Just think about Paul Bogard being raised in Minnesota in a cabin very close to a lake, very close to a forest, and a starry sky. So he spent his childhood in Western Australia. I don't know whether you can conjure a picture of the map of Australia. So think about Western Australia, which is densely populated. Then he moved to the Verdant Hunter Valley of New South Wales, and he realized that there was no word in English to describe the pain, the suffering, the distress, the despair of long-time residents in that area of the country, in that part of the country, in the Upper Hunter Valley, over the destruction caused by the area's open pit coal mines. So talking to people who had been living in that part of Australia for a long time, for generations, he realized they were trying to articulate to language a feeling for which there was no word in English. Right? And it was at that point that Albrecht and his wife decided to create the word Solastalgia. They coined it. They invented the word back in the early 2000s. And now let me take you for a walk again, and we're going to conduct an exercise in semantic archaeology. Let's look at the etymology of the word. This is a gift for Cristina, because I know Cristina is very much in love with the etymology of words, just like myself. So every time we come across a new concept, we need to ensure we know where the roots of this word come from. So let's look at the etymology of the word. Sylvia mentioned sperare in Latin, which is the root from which the word esperar, esperanza, come from. So solastalgia comes from the Latin words for solis, solari, desolation, desolare, and pain or sorry, algia, which is originally a Greek word. So solastalgia bring Greek and Latin words together. It's a neologism that defines or that describes the pain or distress caused by the ongoing loss of solace and the sense of desolation connected to the present state of one's home and territory. By the way, this is Albrecht's definition of the concept. This is not Paul's definition, right? This is the original definition that Paul quotes in his book. It is the existential and lived experience of negative environmental change, manifest as an attack on one's sense of place. It is characteristically a chronic condition tied to the gradual erosion of identity created by the sense of belonging to a particular loved place and a feeling of distress or psychological desolation about its unwanted transformation. I know it's a long definition. I mean, he could have said the same, exactly the same, with fewer words. But then again, let me draw your attention to key words, key components in the concept of solastalgia. You've got pain, distress, suffering, loss. Loss is a very important word. To better understand the concept of solastalgia, we need to be aware that loss is probably the greatest philosophical problem on earth as we know it to be, right? Then sense of place, that's why I have underlined that phrase, one sense of place. The erosion of identity, because our identity is closely connected to the place where we have grown. So place has got an impact on people's identity. Place is not the same as space. Space is abstract, like time. But place is physical, is tangible. There's a stubborn physicality about place, if you see what I mean. Unwanted transformation, that's another important phrase that I have highlighted. The point is that Albrecht was extremely sensitive to the fact that lots of peoples, and I use the plural on purpose, lots of peoples from all over the world have been dispossessed of one of the most cherished things for our community, which is their lands. Think about Australia. Think about how colonialism deprived indigenous peoples that have been lived in Australia for millennia of their lands. Think about, you know, the trauma experienced by the stolen generations in Australia. Albrecht is an Australian philosopher. It's no coincidence that Albrecht, like many other eco-critics, happened to be born in Australia, or in Canada, or in the United States, where you've got loads of examples of First Nations, indigenous communities that were outrageously deprived of their lands. Look at the next slide. I'd like to emphasize this notion that there's room for hope. So within solastalgia, there's room for hope. Look at this. For all the pain caused by what has been lost and what might be lost, there is within solastalgia the promise of possibility. And a possibility is another way of saying hope, right? It's, in this context, it can be taken to be synonymous with hope. As Glenn Albrecht writes, I have always argued that solastalgia is not irreversible, and that's wonderful news. The way to do so, he says, is through working to mitigate and repair whatever is causing the solastalgia in the first place. That obviously it's going to be different depending on the context, on where and who you are. But what remains constant is solastalgia's invitation to grieve and then also to act. So we're going to take our time to suffer, to go through pain and distress, but then we need to do something to change things for the better. We need to take action. Well, Bogard summarizes the whole rationale behind his book in a marvelous manner, in 3 steps. He says, to feel our emotions about climate change, another distraction is, and then he gives 3 reasons. First, to honor those natural reactions, because emotions are natural reactions. We can't control emotions anymore, and we can, well, in much the same way we can't control breath. It's not a natural reaction, it's a natural response, because we are, you know, bodily entities. We are embodied beings. And in doing so, to care for ourselves, to resist disillusionment, exhaustion, or apathy. So that's the first, let's say, the first aim, the first goal behind Bogard's book. We need to honor, we need to acknowledge that emotions are a natural reaction on the part of humankind or humanity to what's going on right now in the world. We need to acknowledge those emotions. Why? Because we need to acknowledge them so that we can start caring for ourselves and for other people and for other dwellers with whom we share the earth, the non-human dwellers of this world. Second, it is also to feel this emotion is also to better understand the grief and other emotions of peoples that have long suffered the brutal effects of oppression and dispossession, peoples for whom the traumas inflicted by a changing climate are the latest in a long series of traumas. So think about colonialism, think about the global south. So climate change is one more of those woes these peoples have to cope with. There are many others, there are many other traumas, there are many other pains that have been inflicted by history. And now they have to add one more item to the list, which is changing climate or climate change. And finally, to feel these emotions is to better understand our collective fate and our connected response to a disappearing world. And then, as you can see, this part of the text ties up very nicely with Hans thinking about collectivity and the need for a collective response on the part of humanity. Well, I'm almost done with the first part, so I will have to ask you to be a bit patient with me. This is how the book finishes. My goals for this book, Bogard said, were 3. To raise awareness of the impact on our emotions from living in a disappearing world. So let's raise awareness amongst people that a changing world has got an impact on our emotions because we are emotional beings. Second, to argue that in order to take effective action, we must be willing to engage with our emotions. And especially, and this is the third goal, to offer the reader our company, to give them evidence that they are not alone with their feelings. By the way, Cristina says something about not being alone in his presentation as well. Well, this comes as no surprise, I think, because we are gregarious beings. We are political beings. If we are to use Aristotle's language, we were born into society, and humanity is a highly contagious disease, right? And look at this space or this room that Bogard creates for hope. This book begins with the belief that every action counts and the way we live matters. May the words offered here bring solace, understanding, and inspiration for action. So there's a powerful and a powerfully meditative component to many of the writings that have been gathered by Bogard in this book. But what you find at the end of the book is a kind reminder that there's hope and a call to action. This is committed eco-writing, and committed eco-writing seeks to instill in people the awareness that it is our responsibility, both individual and collective, to take action, to do something. And everyone can do something in their respective spheres, in their respective realms. Today we have a bunch of scholars and students here who have gathered to discuss 2 very difficult texts. We are somehow acting responsibly. This is what we can do. We as teachers, as scholars, as students need to be conversant with the state of the art, with the crest of the wave in terms of what is being thought about the planet in a situation of extreme crisis, and we need to pass on the message. We need to spread the word, right? And take action. This is what I call environmental activism. Obviously, this doesn't mean going to a museum and destroying a work of art, because that is probably going to be an irreversible action. I mean, if you destroy a work of art from, let's say, the Renaissance, it's not going to be, I mean, there's no plan B for a Mona Lisa, for example, or for a painting by Renoir or by Klimt or any other master painter that we have in the history of Western or Eastern art, right? But this is a form of environmental activism. So let's have a look at the 2 takes on Solastalgia. Okay, so I have lifted 2 excerpts from each of the 2 essays. Let's have a look at the first one, Holly Howard's A Return to Feeling, which I think is a celebration of touch. I don't know whether you will agree with me on this, but this is my overall impression. What Holly Howard is doing in this short essay is celebrating the power of touch. Look at the first excerpt. What the hands do is the story of our relationship to the world. A story can be told about how the disappearance of the world around us corresponded with the replacement of the feeling human body with machines. The Industrial Revolution mechanized handiwork. Mechanical innovations seemed to hold out the promise of mass-producing happiness. As each decade passed, the hands touched more human-made things, less of the earth from which the raw materials for those things came. So it is possible to tell the story of humanity just by focusing on what hands have done to the world. Think about the cave paintings from the Neolithic. There's a beautiful passage at the beginning of this beautiful meditation on how Howard was absolutely fascinated by the beauty and the mystery of these hands that were imprinted on cave walls so long ago. Think about agriculture. Think about the cycle of the seasons before the Industrial Revolution changed the face of the world for the rest of time. With the passage of time from the Industrial Revolution onwards, the hands touch more human-made things than natural things, than the raw materials those human-made things came from. So it's interesting. Have you ever thought about the history of humanity from this standpoint, from this perspective? Because I think it's a fascinating story that needs to be told. Hands seem to be more damaging than feet. So it's possible, as I say in that note, to look at the history of humankind through the lens of what our hands have done to the world. Let's have a look at the second quote. This is the author speaking. As a practice, as a way of moving through my feelings, of staying in my animal body, I try to feel with my hands. It may seem a bit funny, so think of a person touching everything, both human-made and natural objects. When we touch the earth, we are touched by it, for the word also refers to some interior motion in us, some subtle transformation. So we touch the earth, and the earth reciprocates our touch. We have touched every place on the planet now, but as our species reach has expanded, ironically, we touch the world less and less with our hands, and we've lost the feeling that we are being touched back. Now think about artificial intelligence, think about the digital revolution. We live in a digital world, in a hyper-connected world where we seem to have lost touch with reality, in a literal and figurative sense of the word. Sorry. So to touch is active, but to be touched is passive. It requires us to acknowledge the agency and power of what touches us. Now, this is a wonderful quote, I think. It brings to mind lots of interesting ideas that have been proposed by other philosophers and thinkers. Well, David Abram is one of them. My Animal Body evokes the title of Abram's book, Becoming Animal, An Earthly Cosmology, which was published in 2010. That is a must. There's a book that you need to read because it's going to change your view of the world forever. What Abram says time and again, not just in Becoming Animal, but also in a previous book entitled The Spell of the Senses that was published in 1996, is that what we are witnessing is an increase or an increasing detachment from the world. Bodies are the places of existence. This is what Jean-Luc Nancy, the French philosopher, says in a very well-known book titled Corpus, which is the Latin word for body. Now let me draw your attention to lots of current theories and proposals about the porosity of human and non-human bodies, the mutually constitutive entanglements in the vast web of life. Obviously, the roots of this kind of thinking are to be found in two very important books by Barrett and Bennett, published in 2007 and 2010. I'm talking about Meeting the Universe Halfway by Karen Barrett and Vibrant Matter, A Political Ecology of Things, which was published by Jane Bennett in 2010. So what I want to emphasize is that behind this kind of thinking that we have in Solastalgia is a substratum of ideas that are deeply rooted in what has been called new materialisms. And new materialisms acknowledge the non-centrality of human beings in the cosmos and the agency of both human and non-human entities in the world, right? So very quickly, let's have a look at the second text, Paul Bogard's One Path to Solastalgia. To me, this is a celebration of white things. So in this meditation, Bogard thinks about his own childhood. He reminisces about his own childhood spent in close touch with the non-human world, and he seeks to articulate his own understanding of what solastalgia is all about. This is what he says in this essay. For a long while, at childhood, all I did was fall in love with this bird, this lake, and the world of which both were a part. Look at this bird, this lake. It focuses on the specificity of elements that are closely tied to the place where he was born. I was someone who loved wild places and wild things, caught in a society that rewards those who see the planet as theirs, to use however they like, an economic system that facilitates the destruction of the natural world, a culture that craves short-term profit over long-term life. Well, this is, a timely reminder that we live in a self-suicidal civilization. So the course that we have taken is simply self-suicidal. If we destroy the planet, which is home to life in general, both human and non-human, we are destroying our future and the future of future generations. And I think this kind of thinking that somehow Paul Bogard masterfully captures in the second paragraph is closely connected to the kind of resources thinking that is so prevalent in Western epistemologies. So in Western epistemologies is us, human beings, and the other, or the others, the rest of the world, which includes, the non-human, the subaltern, and the subaltern we now cannot speak. And those people live in very precarious circumstances. So you can see it's the kind of thinking that somehow justifies binaries. Us, them, res cogitans, res extensa. So those binaries are so deeply entrenched in our thinking that they seem to be simply inescapable. And this is, I promise you, this is the last quotation. We cannot stay in the world we love, for that world is being radically changed by forces beyond our control, and still we love. The question for me, the question Solastalgia asks, will be how? What will it mean to love the living world, lake, lums, daughter, and on, when so much of that world is being destroyed? By the way, the daughter is juxtaposed next to looms and lake, because Bogard is father to a 5-year-old daughter who's changed his life. Of this I'm sure, love is the emotion that leads to every other. Fear, grief, anger, happiness, joy, hope. It is the emotion to trust and follow as we find our way. So this is something that we could discuss later on, the role of love in connection with or in relation to hope as a force that can help human beings change the world for the better, hopefully for the better. And just some final food for thought and questions for debate and discussion. So let's have a look at the first quotation. These are texts by Bogard. This is Paul Bogard on the animal body and breathing earth. Look at the first one. To feel all the beauty, not understand it, feel it. To see a sunset or in the early morning when you see all the birds, this is something spiritual. I don't know whether this brings to mind British and German romanticism, American transcendentalism, Thoreau deciding to spend a spell of time in the woods. This is, romanticism, transcendentalism. I don't want fear so strong that I am incapacitated, but there's fear that comes from being attentive enough that you realize there is life greater than you. Life that was here before you and will be after. So this is, this centering human beings you know, from the center of the cosmos. That we tend to think human beings are on top, at the center, never in the margins or periphery of things. So this to me is a subtle reminder that we are not the center of the world. We've never been. We're just one more species next to other species. But, well, you know, we tend to be preposterous and proud, a proud species. When I lie back and close my eyes, this far slip of beach right next to the end of the ocean feels like being up close to an enormous breathing being. Bass drums surf thump reverberating through the sound. Living out here with no lights alone, you would indeed become sensitive to seasons, rhythms, weather, sounds, right up next to the sea, right up under the sky, like lying close to a love's skin, to her blood and breath and heartbeat. This is, by the way, the same kind of writing that you find in David Abrams' books. This is eco-philosophy in a way. And here you have 3 questions for you. I'm not going to say they're simple questions because they aren't. I don't have answers for them myself, but I do hope you do. You do have answers for them. So my first question, was solastalgia a new concept to you? That's a very easy question. If not, where or how or when did you get to hear about this concept, right? And if you didn't have a clue about solastalgia, and well, now you do, and now you're almost experts. So my next question is, what do you make of this concept now? Are you clearer about its implications, about its potential as an exegetical or interpretative tool? Second question, why do you think it is necessary to look at or into eco-emotions, including solastalgia? Because there might be, I mean, there are other eco-emotions, to understand the current environmental crisis. And the last one, how can solastalgia as a critical concept and tool help us better interrogate cultural, including literary artifacts, addressing the current environmental crisis? Just think of eco-poetry and many other eco-genres that are interrogating the dilemmas of the current environmental crisis, right? So thank you for listening. Thank you for your patience. I think it took me longer than 20 minutes. My apologies. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see your faces at long last. At last. Yes. Okay, I'm going to stop this.
Thank you very much, Leonor. You may have felt that you were alone, but you weren't. We were here with you. And it was amazing taking this nice walk together. We were actually listening to you. At the same time, we were watching and having delight, deriving delight from this beautiful presentation full of wonderful images of a world that is disappearing, actually. And well, I think that I started seeing hands up even when you were reading questions. So people are eager to participate. I think that the first person to raise her hand was Mamen, then Macarena, and then Maria. So I will enable their mics so that they can participate one after the other in the order I used, okay? And then Silvia, after Maria, Silvia. So whenever you want, Mamen, the floor is yours.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you both Leonor and Cristina for your wonderful presentation. Leonor, thank you for explaining the neologism, because when I was reading at it, for me it was like, as you said, like the feeling of nostalgia, and in fact, the feeling of loss. And when I was reading the introduction, and it's true that when we start reading Holly Hawthorne Hayworth, A Return to Feeling, the first question is like so powerful. How do you feel? That it's something that you ask when somebody dies or is suffering any kind of loss. But what I want to share with you is that Solastalgia reminds me a lot to Rob Nixon, Slow Violence. Cristina, you know that pretty well. But I feel Solastalgia like a direct consequence of that concept. Well, I think that you already know that concept, but for me, it's like another implicit consequence of capitalist system destroying natural resources and people losing their homes. As Leonor said, they feel homesick. They feel like their homes are dying in a way. So I don't know, I created that connection and I wanted to share that with you.
Thank you very much, Mami. Yes, it's a very pertinent observation indeed, because slow violence is a form of violence that has got the greatest impact on countries located in what is called the global south. And those are the people whose lands have been traditionally, degraded, exploited, overexploited. So it makes all the sense in the world to connect slow violence with solastalgia, because people suffering from slow violence, which is a deterred form of violence, deterred intensive time when it happens, those people experience solastalgia because their homes are being destroyed, because they depend on the land for their sustenance, and their land is being destroyed, is being poisoned. So
exactly, they are suffering. Suffering that environmental loss.
That's it. So loss, environmental loss, again, that's a central concept. Yes, so thank you for suggesting this very pertinent connection between slow violence and solastalgia. You're absolutely right. Thank you, Mami.
Thank you.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you so much, Leonor. I did not know anything about the author, so responding to your first question, this is the first time that I heard about solastalgia, and now I'm totally obsessed about it. I really love it. And before talking about the potential of solastalgia, because I've been making comments, I just want to say that when you were talking about the previous, I'm not sure if they are previous works, but the other works about the author, talking about darkness, I found it super interesting for our previous discussion, right? Because at least he reverses or dismantles this, just because, I haven't read the works, but the titles are looking for darkness in the light. So, just the opposite of dismantling somehow these opposites we were commenting on before. And talking about the potential of the concept, I think it really talks about dispossession in general. As you were saying, climate change, but it can also be applied to gentrification, for example. This sense of being homesickness within your home, I think it also talks about this modern yet imperial and colonial way of dispossession and displacement. And then I think it's super useful first because it focus on emotion, as you were saying, and then of course in embodied knowledge, embodied epistemologies, we were talking about touch, corpus, and I think those are important things. Even though it's kind of, we've been talking about this since forever, but I feel we still need to make this claim, right? Because we've been deprived of all these knowledges coming from a certain type of population because of reason over emotion and so on. And then I think, and to me this is the most interesting thing, because I'm also really into spirituality and queer temporality and so on, and I think solastalgia really can be aligned with this idea of queer temporality. Because, let me explain myself. Hope tends to be framed within the future all the time, you know, what it's coming, not yet, and so on. But I feel that it also has to do a lot with the past, with the nostalgia. Let me again do a footnote of my background. What I know about hope is coming from decolonial authors, most of them Afro-diasporic authors, and at least for me, one of the best definitions of hope, and she doesn't really use that word a lot, but it's coming from Yomaira Figueroa, and she talks, she links all the time hope with spirituality. This is somehow coming from the past, you know, it's coming from the ancestors, and it's linking spirituality with hope, first of all, because spirituality has been a source of hope traditionally, and also because spirituality is a source of post-human interdependence, because this centers the human from, you know, the focus, and it talks about the sea, the earth, but especially the sea, in the case of the Afro diaspora, and it talks about the ancestors who are an important part of, you know, of this. So I like how this author also, you know, queers or dismantle or blurs like the boundaries between the past and the future, as he blurs other boundaries, as you were saying, like the grief, anger, hope, which, you know, I think you said that pain is a catalyst for change. I've seen this all the time also in Afro-diasporic authors. I'm thinking of, I don't know, Audre Lorde uses of anger. So I think, you know, this is a recurrent conversation, but I feel like the way this author framed it was super nice. And also I'm obsessed with reading, and I just, you know, I was super surprised and intrigued about this connection too. So I feel it's definitely someone we need to take into consideration. Thank you so much. Sorry about my enthusiasm. I hope it makes sense, even though, you know, I was.
It does make sense. It does make sense. Thank you, Macarena. Yes, you've talked about embodied epistemologies, queer temporality, and this very interesting connection between hope and spirituality, which obviously comes from, you know, First Nations and peoples who knew how to live much closer to the earth than we do now. So yes, definitely, those are also very pertinent components in our discussion. You've said that we have been talking about this for ages, embodied epistemologies. We are thinking and feeling bodies, but we tend to forget about this all the time. So again, we need to be reminded of it time and again. Thanks, Macarena.
It's Maria's time. Maria Martín.
Yes. Can you listen to me? Yes. Well, first, I would like to thank you, both of you, for your insight on these works, because they were quite enriching. In relation to what we said before about hope, I would like to point out that this anthology, well, we said before that writing was an individual action, but it can also become collective, as we can see here in this anthology, because I think this is a way of joining forces, and it can also be a direction towards hope, because it creates shared experiences to take action out of desperation, out of solastalgia, as we are seeing. And well, at the end of the day, this is a space of voicing an experience. Is an space of communication. In this case, it communicates an environmental necessity that concerns both human and non-human beings. Well, in relation to the work by Albrecht Glenn, in one of the chapters, this author points that and I quote, when the limits of one's world, its laws and order are destroyed by forces beyond one's control, then home becomes not only toxic, it becomes nostalgia without aim. So it also creates this sense of hopelessness. So again, connected with hope, because there is a question that it's also posed here, and will home even exist in the near future? Is a question, in my view, sufficient cause for existential distress. So a way of encouraging this action again in relation to hope. And finally, I would like to point out Holly Howard's intervention when she talks about education. And it's because, well, she points that after the Industrial Revolution, there was a detachment of humans from nature, because we were not in touch with nature around us. Mechanization caused this, and we couldn't be in touch with other beings. So, and this was quite interesting to me, because it's true that when we talk about nature education, I mean, in my case, it was like that. We were told, look, don't touch. So don't, you are not part of that nature. You are detached from it. You don't feel it. You are not able to develop some feelings that feel you close to it. And I think that is a good point here, because that would be also a way to address the problems we are facing nowadays. That education would be key in this case, but from a different perspective, as this author highlights. Well, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. That was also a very pertinent observation. And well, education, how we are educated when it comes to ecology. So there's a very interesting paragraph in the essay. I haven't quoted that because our time was limited, in which the author exactly underscores what you have just said. So we are invited to look at things, but not to touch them, right? So it seems that ecological education needs to be an immersive experience. We need to touch things. Hence the title of that meditation. So the return to feeling, how touching things, how experiencing the world through all the senses is of paramount importance. Thank you, Maria.
Silvia, whenever you want.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, all right. So I'm back here. I'm really and deeply grateful to Leonor for bringing up all these issues, because they have tremendously put a name of a situation that I've been living through the past year very strongly, which is this really need to look at the sky. And I have to confess that nowadays I don't look at the TV anymore. And I'm very grateful that I can see Venus from my dining table. So I focus on Venus. I have my binoculars with me. And as the night darkens and grows, stars don't see Venus. And when the moon is out, it's a gorgeous sight. And it really inspires me, you know, in going into a really good mood for sleeping. So I totally recommend it. If nothing else, for practical reasons, to look at the sky every night. I have the word Solastalgia have not crossed my path until now. So I'm very grateful that you brought it up. And it really connects, it articulates a lot of issues that I've been working on for the last, I would say, 5 years. Something that I wanted to, that really wanted to point out is that the essay by the lady what's her name? Howard, Ali, really touched me because she emphasized the role of emotions in taking action, the importance of memory, imagination, and gratitude. And those are key for us to visualize, to manifest what is it that we have around us and within us. So it helps us to not only to wish, but to already be in a sense of a state of bliss and fullness that really, really links us to love. And I think Mar will have to say about this because she has studied this. So this energy of loving that Paloma Cavada always talks about, la energía de amar, it is key to aspects of empathy, forgiveness, and understanding. And these, for me, are levels of consciousness that we are in when we connect with the creation and when we connect with the love within ourselves. All these in contact, in dialogue with what Leonor was saying about activating the right side of the brain, which is not very much valued anymore in in the way that the world asks us to function. And this is what Hayward emphasizes with: let's live through the emotions. Let's go to the place where the emotions generate. Because this will connect with our inner self, and very important, with our inner child. That child that looks at the sky and really, really connects with the stars and the rising sun and everything else. So I think this is important because it takes us inward to look for answers. And this, of course, has a spiritual dimension, as connected to what Macarena and Mar were saying before. And I think that once we activate within ourselves this mode, we will be able to change things around us as much as things inside us. Because, I remember, and I finish with this, what the ancient spiritual master said. If you want to change something outside, you need to change inside first. So thank you very much. And I'm really grateful for this session. Thank you.
And Sylvia, it's me that is grateful for your comments. Thank you for this lesson in spirituality. That's all I can say. Yes, you're absolutely right about everything you've said. I cannot agree more with what you have said. Gratitude, imagination, memory, a state of bliss, a higher level of consciousness, which is an enhanced awareness that there is a sacred bond with everything. Thank you.
After Silvia, Susana, then Maria, then Fihan.
Okay, well, Leonor, thank you very much for your presentation. It was a real pleasure to hear you. Actually, I think that there is no better presenter than you to talk about an anthology of emotions. You are always so generous and warm in your talks, so I wanted to say that. It was a real pleasure to hear you talking about that. Well, and also great thank you to you for presenting this term to me, as Macarena has previously mentioned. I have heard very briefly about that, but I didn't get very much into into that idea, and now I'm totally obsessed, as she says. So I have to confess that I also checked the etymology of the word. So that is like another thing that I share with you. And I really think that I could apply this term also to my studies about climate change plays, because it's not my main area of investigation, but I had also made some studies about climate change plays and ecology in general, associated to some associations that are deal with climate change theater action. So I think it's really very useful to me. So again, thank you for that. I just wanted to point out two things that I was thinking about when you were speaking. The first one is about the idea of solastalgia as a celebration of feeling, emotion, and touch. I was very much interested in that part, but I was also thinking about how, obviously for us Mediterranean people and in our culture, touch is very easy thing to do, but maybe in other cultures, this proximity, this closeness is not so very much understood. So I was wondering if maybe this part of the definition of this proximity in sense of touch could maybe not be very much addressed to other cultures that are not like ours. So I don't know what you think about that, or if you ever at least thought about that idea. And my second thought is, well, I don't know if I'm jumping a little bit, but I'm trying to draw connections between the two texts. I was thinking that obviously the potential of both authors are related to action. Also that doubtful discussion or debate we were talking about light and darkness, because both of them relate to that. Cristina, you're saying yes, but it's true that Bogard also used the metaphor of light and darkness in a similar way, not exactly the same, but in a sort of similar way to Han's text. So maybe that's another food for thought or discussion we could extend a little bit. And I want to finish, obviously, with the nexus of the two texts in the concept of love. Yeah, that's the big celebration of love that obviously makes the connection and threads the ideas of the two authors, and how there is very much potential in this feeling, particularly nowadays in an area of uncertainty and individualism. So that's all on my side. Thank you very much again for your brilliant talk.
Thank you, Susanna. Yes, just going back to what you have said about touch, the celebration of feeling that we somehow are confronted with in the first of the essays. Well, there's a cultural component to touch, obviously. So we tend to touch each other a lot in Mediterranean cultures, probably not so much in the northern part of Europe. And well, I'm also thinking of some countries in the Far East, or even in North America. But I take it that touch applies not just to touching each other, not touching other people, but also touching objects, touching things. So what the author seems to be conveying is this idea that we need to experience the world through our bodies. And it's not just thinking, it's also feeling, sentipensamiento. You know that a colleague of ours talks about this idea. Nacho Lima talks about this notion of sentipensamiento, because we are embodied beings. But obviously there is a cultural dimension to that. You're absolutely right, Susanna, yes. And then the nexus, as you said, the link between Han and Bogard and this concept of solastalgia has to do with love, hope. I mean, love and hope are, I would say, inseparable. And there's one more word which hasn't been mentioned so far, which is care. We hope because we care. We care about what's going on in the world, because what's happening to other people, because what's happening to us. So care and attention. I mean, those are the common substratum to both texts is a simple substratum, I would say. And it's attention, is care, is hope for what is not yet, and it is love. I don't know whether you agree with love being the emotion that takes you to other emotions of the spectrum of human emotions. That's something that we could discuss. I'm not sure. But certainly there's a powerful connection between hope, love, care, and attention.
So thank you so much, Leonor, for your super generous talk. As I agree completely with what Susanna was saying right now. It's a pleasure for the senses to listen to you almost. So it's wonderful to follow your train of thought. And I always enter in a kind of atmosphere when I listen to you, and a kind of mood which is wonderful for thinking, for opening your mind to new concepts such as this one, because I knew about the concept through a colleague who uses it in connection with nostalgia for studying comics. You know, I study also, I'm researching on comics too, but I haven't got any beyond the notion of that, and listening to him in a conference. And yes, so I associated the nostalgia and solastalgia, and I was very cautious towards it, because I distrust nostalgia a lot as a concept, because it has been commodified by neoliberalism in order for us to buy more things, to try to go back to a lost childhood or youth or whatever. So I'm extremely cautious with nostalgia, because sometimes you can say it's the contrary to action. It's like a backward action or an inward action. And it's also connected with retrotopia, according to Bauman, and searching idealization of past, which was never, perhaps was never there, that past in fact. So I was very cautious towards them until today, which count me in as a new fan of Solastalgia, and I get it now thanks to you. And what I didn't catch when I was reading the text is I could see the emotion factor, and I could see the survival mechanism, but I could see that it was a very individual matter, a very individual affair, since it's connected to one's home, and there's a connection of one's own home, and the loss that is that appears when one sense of place is attacked. So always this focus on the individual self. So I was wondering how that connected with a collective response, again going back to my concerns with Han's texts. Actually you gave me now the clue, and perhaps I have to go back to this entire anthology now. I want to read every single word, because it's how this collective response stems from, if I understood you well, and perhaps you can confirm, by a common vulnerability. And I think you quoted Butler as well. So by precariousness, basically acknowledging that one's loss is probably mirroring another's loss. And that is a common loss, but there's a sense of empathy there. But I like that feeling of empathy in the concept of solastalgia after my rush reading of the PDF that you provided. So I think I got it now, but I would like to expand more, to elaborate more on that. And now I can, after listening to you and to your definition, I can see why my colleague in comics studies is so obsessed with solastalgia, because definitely I can see a portrayal of nature from that lens in many of the graphic narratives I'm thinking about right now. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria. So I would say solastalgia is not an individual affair. Definitely, it's not an individual. It can be both. It can be individual and collective, or communal. And actually, Albrecht came up with this new word based on his own experience. He had a first-hand experience of what it means to lack a word, to refer to a sense of collective mourning, a sense of collective loss. So I would say this, it's at the very roots of the act of coining a new word to refer to a new emotion. Collectivity looms large in the background, so to speak. So it's both an individual and, well, mostly a collective or communal experience, I would say. And well, thank you for your words. I would say yes, and I'm also a bit suspicious of the concept of nostalgia because it's past oriented, whereas solastalgia is future oriented. It looks into the near and deep future and tries to envision a different version of the world based on responsible action. So solastalgia propels you forward, whereas nostalgia propels you backwards in time towards probably a pastoral reality that never existed in practice. So I would say there is a modicum of realism and pragmatism in the concept of solastalgia. I think it's a powerful tool to approach the analysis, the close reading of certain works of art that have been produced nowadays in different genres: poetry, fiction, non-fiction, comics, video games. Is a powerful interpretive tool, I would say. It's simple, but it's got, you know, the simplicity and elegance of what is powerful. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Leonor. Thank you. Very clarifying. Thank you. Wonderful.
Can you hear me? Okay, so first of all, thank you so much, Cristina and Leonor, for this amazing presentation. And I have a very short comment on one of the quotes in Leonor's presentation, is that a love as an emotion that leads to other, including fear, grief, and other. Do I agree or disagree? Well, for me, love is definitely one of the most important emotion that connects to other ones, because when we think about, for example, anger with a family member or disappointment towards a family member, it is because we love them as a premise. And it also reminds me of, I think, Sarah Ahmed in her book, The Cultural Politics of Emotion. She mentions our hatred for the other is premised on the love of the nation, So I definitely agree that it is important, but I wouldn't say that it is the only one or the outmost emotion, because I would prefer to think about all the emotion as a kind of, they have an inner fluidity among them. So, and that's why I don't quite agree with Han's definition of hope against fear, because I think everything is connected. So it made me think about what about hope? Like, what about the relationship between hope and other emotion? Where does this hope come from? Probably because of love. We love something, we love the future, and we are hoping for a better one, or something else. And where does this hope lead us to? Like, it might lead us to something positive, like more love, or it might lead to something negative, like we hope and then we feel disappointment. Thank you.
Thank you, Fihan, for that wonderful contribution on love. Yeah, actually, I would say solastalgia happens just because we love. Because we love the world, then we bother to experience solastalgia because we love the world that is precious to us. So yes, maybe you're right. So love is the common substratum to many emotions. And well, it's absolutely central to hope. So thank you.
Then next, let me check, Mar and Valentina.
Okay, well, thank you, first of all, Leonor. I just think that you have such wonderful prose, lyric prose. I mean, I understand perfectly how you identify with the object of your study, if you want to put it in those words. It was absolutely amazing, really, to hear your presentation. So thank you so much. And I'm going to insist just a little bit because we have already discussed it on emotions, because for me was really interesting, emotions and feelings, right? Because you made a distinction, very like clear-cut distinction between both. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on that or give me some references so that we can continue, understanding this contrast, because for you was as I said, a very clear-cut distinction. And of course, I'm going to insist, how could I not, on love, right? Because what I think it's interesting is to tie everything we have been talking about with discredited knowledges. We have been talking about First Nations, we have been talking about Afro-diasporic authors, and how those so-called discredited knowledges are the only ones that can save us, like save the world and save us as human beings, and of course, more than human beings too, right? So that is, for me, a very important part of that. And in that sense, the important thing that we need to obviously always relate it to is the power of community. We have been talking a lot, and I noticed this throughout our discussion today, about collective. And of course, it's individual and collective, but I would rather say communal efforts, because either we are really into this together, and this is it, guys. So I think that it's the power of community and the power of communal healing. Of course, I've been working on healing for a long time, but I think that's communal healing, and I don't mean obviously among human beings, right? But also with the rest of the species. And how I was wondering if you would agree with this, because when I was reading and then listening to you today, I was reading these texts, I was thinking all the time, these are healing narratives in a way, related obviously to the, it reminded us of, or it reminded me of the concept of Whelan's healing narratives, right? So it's part of that. It's an individual act, because individuals have to touch, to have a close relationship to nature, but also as a community. And of course, the most part of any healing ritual is that an individual can only thrive, in a community that is there. No, if an individual is, not integrated in a community and in a loving community, so that takes me to love. Finally, in a loving community, the individuals don't survive, basically, and don't thrive. And of course, I wanted to just throw in very quickly bell hooks, important, crucial role, all her work on love, especially, of course, the cherished book All About Love, and her, the whole philosophy or pedagogy of love. We need to go back to our bell hooks, because I think that she's one of the great sources of understanding how love works. Remember, in All About Love, she takes up the, Erich Fromm's notion of love, but she complicates it. It's not easy to love, and to care is not easy. So that's why we need to, work. I think that love is not the simplistic definition that we think, or we tend to think about a lot, but it's a very, very complicated issue. What happens? Zihan was talking about, was talking about how do you relate to a family member that has, that has made you suffer and all of that. Well, how do you forgive and continue to love, and continue to care for people, and not only for, horrible people. Sorry, I'm not going to name him today, but, who are destroying our world and our ecosystem, right? How do you actually actively care for all those, white, in general, heterosexual dominant subjects, right? So that was my contribution to this. Thank you so much. I really loved your presentation.
Thank you, Mar. Thank you for your contribution again. I loved what you've just said. Well, José Antonio Marina, that's someone I've learned from a lot. Diccionario de los Sentimientos. And then there's a classic author who has explored the topic of emotions, the universality of emotions. I don't remember the name, but I will look for his name and send it to you. But José Antonio Marina, for me, is the Bible when it comes to understanding feelings, Diccionario de los Sentimientos. Well, he has written extensively about feelings. Thank you, by the way, Maria, because Maria has also recommended a reading, Elogio de la Mano by Jesus Carrasco, and so has Mar, All About Love by Bell Hooks. I will definitely read that book. All I know about love, theoretically speaking, comes from Erich Fromm, the classic, The Art of Loving. But, well, we need to read Bell Hooks as well. And, well, you're absolutely right. These are healing narratives. So this is asking people to articulate their understanding of their own loss based on the damage that is being inflicted upon the places they call home, the places where they live. Yes, there are healing narratives. And I think it's much better to use the word communal and collective. Yes, absolutely right. Yeah. And thank you. Thank you for your observations, your comments on discredited knowledges, which are the only ones that can save us. Yes, for sure.
Literally. Literally.
And you have identified the sample of subjects that are causing havoc and destruction. You've named them. Okay.
Unfortunately, yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt. Before Angelica participates, I just want to highlight that Carolina also mentioned a very interesting publication in the chat related to touching. So because I think that you didn't mention her, and just sorry to interrupt, just wanted to say this. Angelica, whenever you want.
Okay, hi, good morning. Well, this is so difficult for me speaking English, but here we go. First of all, thank you so much for the presentation, Cristina, Leonor. I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed reading this text. This one was actually my favorite. Learning about the concept of solastalgia is so important to me personally, politically, and theoretically. There's something that intrigues and frustrates me at the same time. I'm from Colombia. I live here, and maybe that's part of why I think this way. The thing is, this is something communities of the original peoples have been talking about for so many years. No one listened to them. And it seemed like it always takes theories, mostly white men who speak English, from places like Australia, Canada, US, and to discuss these topics before they acknowledge And then people say, of course, that makes so much sense. And so speaking of colonialism, this is exactly what Quijano describes as the coloniality of knowledge. And these conflicts mean it reminds me of Silvia Rivera Cusicanqui's concept of Chehe thinking, because at the same time, I deeply appreciate that people are writing about this and creating all the necessary neologisms to express these emotions. But well, I have a conflict, but I really appreciate this course, these sessions. Talk about hope, talk about Solastalgia, and thank you again for the presentations.
Thank you very much, Valentina, for contributing that, a different stance, a different gaze, a peripheral gaze, because we tend to read Western philosophers, white male philosophers, and we tend to forget that a lot of interesting knowledge, philosophical and otherwise, has been rehearsed, produced, and essayed in other parts of the world, including Latin American countries, obviously, Colombia, where you come from. So you have said something about a book, right? The coloniality of knowledge, right? That was your suggested reading, right? Okay.
Yes, that
Okay.
he write about this a lot.
Aníbal Quijano. Okay, thanks.
Peruvian.
Okay, thank you.
There are no more hands up. I am very, very, very happily surprised by your presence here. And I am very, very grateful for it, very grateful. I saw there were more than 30 people who had applied for the link, and many of you, most of you remained, and it has been a marathon of 3 hours. And you were there, your presence was there, your attention was there, and I'm just in love with this commune of people sharing these very, very interesting, remarkable thoughts, concepts that, of course, will provide the energy that we need to keep on working and applying that to our work. I think that we are building knowledge together. This is something that actually opens up this new space for us. So all of you are very welcome to join us in our next seminar. This is a space for everyone, open, so feel free to email us again to ask for the new link. And let me just remind you, I'm not going to share my screen, but let me just remind you that the next seminar will take place next month on the 24th of February at the same time at 10 o'clock, if I'm not wrong. And the session will be led by our colleague, Maria Porras. And well, of course, I'm looking forward to listening to her. And I have to confess that I leave this seminar with more questions, with more doubts than I actually first arrived here. And these questions are there thanks to you. If we left the session by having all the answers, maybe that would mean that there is something that we need to look closely at, because I don't think that this is a good symptom. Living with more questions is actually what we actually pursue here. Living with more questions that we can collectively and in a commune way that we can approach. This is just a process of creating gaps between these binaries that come here, creating bridges that either destroy and build together, or question this, or set us in motion to a process that is actually the way we have to be in this process, never-ending process. That's all from me. Thank you very much for being here. If there is anything else that you would like to share with us, of course, feel free to do so. If not, thank you very much for having been part of this. This wouldn't have been possible without you. You need to want to go. This was amazing. Thank you so much. No, Maria, no. Don't panic. Don't panic. Don't panic. Let's keep in touch for next session. Don't forget to join us in social media if you have social media, and we will keep in touch in any way. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. See you soon.